This is the Roots and All Budcast, presented by Sarah Wilson.
Hi, and welcome to this week's Budcast. Normally, a Budcast is me talking, but this one is a little bit different because I had the enormous privilege of visiting Hampshire Carnivorous Plants to talk to Matthew Soper in his amazing nursery. I already have the next podcast scheduled for publication, but I wanted to get Matt's information out to you. So if you want to treat yourselves to some carnivorous plants before the season's over, you still just about have time to do so. The audio quality is slightly less polished than it is normally, but I hope you'll forgive us because the interview is really good. And now it's over to Matt.
I'm Matthew Soper, and we'll be talking about carnivorous plants here at Hampshire Carnivorous Plants.
So, Matt, thank you for joining me. I just wondered, what are the main types of carnivorous plants that people might find for sale in the UK?
The ones you usually find are the Venus flytrap, which I'm sure everyone's seen at some point or another, the sundew, which is very sticky, it's an easy plant to grow, and Sarracenia, which is a North American pitcher plant. Those are the main three you normally see.
And what are their native habitats?
Well, a lot of them actually come from the United States of America, normally the deep south, where it's very swampy. That's where you'll find the North American pitcher plants and quite a number of sundews. And the Venus flytrap actually only comes from a small area in North Carolina.
Yeah, I was really surprised to find that out, actually. What is it that's made them become carnivorous? How have they evolved that way? Is there a reason for it?
Yeah, the plants, a lot of people lump them all together and think, oh, they're all carnivorous plants, it's one family, but they've actually all evolved their own separate way. A lot of them aren't related at all. And the main reason why they're carnivorous and they get their nutrients from insects, or in some cases small mammals, is that they've adapted to get their nitrogen from insects and small mammals rather than from the soil. You'll find them in very low nutrient soil. So that's why is that where they grow, there's not much in the ground.
And do they photosynthesize like normal plants?
Yeah, they do photosynthesize as well, but this is just an added bonus for them, so they can grow in areas which, as I say, are very low in nitrogen.
Okay. They've got a reputation for being somewhat fussy. What are the common mistakes that people make with them?
I was very fortunate as that I've been growing them since I was 7. I'm 53 now, and I don't find them different to other plants. You normally find that gardeners have trouble with them because they tend to want to feed things. The carnivorous plants, where they've adapted to get their own nutrition from insects, you're better off just using rainwater and growing them just in a peat compost. If you try and feed them, it really does upset them. And we've never had one die of starvation yet, so you don't have to run around putting flies in them.
If you did, so definitely don't be tempted to feed them the dead flies that you find on your windowsill.
Well, for starters, a Venus flytrap can't eat dead flies because they need something that moves. So when they close, they can actually sense movement. Then they'll clamp down and start to feed on the insect. If you put a dead fly in there, they just close, find there's nothing moving, and gradually reopen. And that does upset them. So the best thing to do with them, if you really are worried about them, is pop them out in a July, August day, and they'll catch enough for themselves.
And fertilisers, don't bother with those?
No. Definitely not. I mean, you will see on the internet different special feeds for fly traps and Sarracenia. I have not found that necessary over the years I've been growing them.
And you mentioned rainwater. So in terms of watering, how would you water them? And does it have to be rainwater?
Rainwater is extremely important in hard water areas. Like here, we're in Hampshire here, near Winchester, and our water's really chalky and very hard. So we really do need to use rainwater for them. And
what does it do if you don't use the rainwater?
You'll find that the Venus flytrap actually kills them. So, yeah, it's not good at all.
The other thing I think I was a bit surprised by was the amount of light that they need. Can you just talk about that?
Yep, Venus flytraps, sundews and the North American pitcher plants require really high light levels and are best grown in an unheated greenhouse in a really bright sunny position, not shady at all. So full sun as much as possible.
And unheated greenhouse, so they don't need too much warmth?
An unheated greenhouse, a lot of people don't realise unheated greenhouse means it's not heated in the winter. In the summer months, they do get very hot. We get well up into 40 degrees centigrade, 90 Fahrenheit. In the winter, it's unheated, so we get temperatures down to about -8 to -10 centigrade on occasion, so very cold in the winter. But they do need that winter rest. Majority of them are herbaceous perennials.
So when you say winter rest, what does that mean? Do they literally die back like a herbaceous perennial would?
Exactly, just like a hosta. So lovely and colourful spring and summer. In the winter, like a hosta, they die back completely. A lot of people at this time try to bring them in the house thinking they're dying, and then they perk up a bit. But, I mean, if you did the same with a hosta or a daffodil, it doesn't do them any good at all. You must let them rest and die down.
Okay, I wonder how many people have actually binned their Venus flytraps thinking they're dead. So with the soil that they need, is that a particular type of soil?
Yeah, we mix our own soil here. It's quite hard to get hold of now. The main ingredient is peat, which is a bit of a no-no now. A lot of garden centres have banned the sale of it. There are some alternatives which are okay, but at the moment our peat mix com one that we use is anyone that we find is really good for them. Okay,
so in view of the fact that it is a bit difficult to find, I know you sell that, don't you, on your website?
We sell it on the website, and if you can get hold of peat, you can use that straight if you can get hold of it. And it's a real shame because it is bad for the environment, but we've just found that where a lot of them grow on peat bogs, a lot of the alternatives just are not suitable, and you do lose your plants, so you've got to be careful.
It's a necessary evil. And we were talking about the traps closing on certain insects and things. I know for a fact that occasionally I've seen people triggering the traps just to see the mechanism work. Is this something that's not advisable? Does it cause any harm to the plants?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really hard not to, because that's half the fun of the plant. I mean, when I was 7 watching them close, I'd seen them initially on a natural history program, and they are fascinating plants. You want to do it, and you will do it. But if you can leave them alone, they get big quite quickly. And we've got some really quite large plants in the greenhouse, and the reason they're large is because they've just been left alone. And it doesn't take that long. If you can leave them for a few months, you'd be surprised how big they can get. And they look very impressive once you get a large, 5-inch pot full of them. They look really good.
So I think on your website as well, you talk about repotting, and you say that there's a maximum size pot that you shouldn't really go beyond. Is that the same for all the carnivorous plants?
Yeah, on the whole, the Sarracenia and the Venus flytrap and most of the sundews, they don't need big pots at all. They've got a very meagre root system, as they try and catch most of their food with their foliage. So big pots do not mean big plants with carnivorous plants. Again, if you're a seasoned gardener, you tend to want to overpot things, whereas carnivorous plants like to be quite tight in their pots, and they perform a lot better.
Okay. And if you did want to have a watering regime, if you were keeping them, well, either in an unheated greenhouse or another kind of sheltered site, or even maybe indoors with some of them, what would the watering regime be? Do they need to sit constantly in water?
Yeah, spring and summer months, stand them in a saucer or a shallow tray in about 1 inch of rainwater, so they've always got wet feet. Very easy. So you don't water them from the top, you just have a little look, make sure the tray's always got about 1 inch of rainwater in it. So not from the top, from the bottom, and always constantly sat in water. In the winter, it's best to keep them just barely damp, and the way we do this is to stand them on damp capillary matting. So they're just damp. So standing in about 1 inch or 2 centimetres of rainwater, spring and summer, and just damp during the winter months.
Okay, and you mentioned, I think, the sundews being relatively easy to look after. What would you say is a good starter plant for people thinking of going into growing them?
Although the Venus flytrap is very popular because it moves, by far the Drosera capensis, which is a South African Cape sundew, this is by far the easiest one to grow. It does catch a lot of whitefly. It moves, but slowly, and it's extremely easy to grow. It flowers freely, and the flowers set viable seed, so you can grow them from seed yourself as well. It's a really good all-round plant and a good gateway plant to get youngsters into growing carnivorous plants.
Okay. So if they catch whitefly, could you conceivably use them as a pest control in, say, a greenhouse? Or if you had, say, fungus gnats, would they be catching enough to actually make a dent in the population?
Yeah, they really do work, especially for whitefly. If you've got a small greenhouse with pelargoniums in there or fuchsias and you suffer from whitefly, they really do work. And I've seen some plants are literally covered in them. It looks like they're being attacked by the whitefly, but after 4 or 5 days, they slowly get absorbed into the leaves. And obviously this benefits the plant as well. So, yeah, they do work. And as you say, fungus gnats are a pain. They're good for those as well. That's the sort of size insect they normally catch. They can just about manage a fly because they can curl around larger insects, but we normally find that wasps can escape from them. So fungus gnats and whitefly are their prey.
Yeah. And is there anything that you've seen them, as it were, spit out? Or is there anything that Venus flytraps don't find palatable?
Yeah, I've seen wasps can get out of them. They can really sort of push their way out. And on some of the North American and then have eaten their way out and escape quite easily. They get out. Yeah.
Are there any that are dangerous to pets or people? Is there any of the sticky stuff on the sundews, is any of that toxic?
No, we've been asked that quite a lot, actually. It's because the pitcher plants, where they're quite brightly coloured, a lot of people think they're poisonous. But none of them are poisonous, but we just don't recommend eating them, really. But they're not poisonous, no.
A little bird told me, actually, that I think it was the BAFTAs. They used Nepenthes cups to serve champagne in.
Yeah, they might well have done, yeah. The name in Southeast Asia, they're called monkey cups because actually orangutans have been known to use them as cups and scoop water up and drink out of them.
I do find actually sometimes when I see them for sale, quite often those cups have got water in them. Is that another way of watering, or is that just collected in there whilst it's been irrigated?
Right, the water in them, initially the plant produces itself and it's actually a digestive fluid. Now, if you've got one and you've tipped them out by accident, or you buy one and the traps haven't got any water in them, you're better off topping them up with about 2 inches of rainwater in the bottom of the larger cups, and in the smaller cups about 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre of rainwater.
Okay. And how long does it take the average, say, Venus flytrap to digest an insect?
That's something the size of a housefly. It takes about a week or so. It takes quite a long time. So once they close, they remain closed for a week to 10 days, and then they gradually come open. The fly will still be in there, but squashed, because it almost sucks the juice out of the fly, as it were. And in the wild, the wind and rain would blow the fly out of the trap.
Okay. Right. So we've gone through the easier one to look after. What would you say is the most challenging?
The challenging ones, if you want to go a bit further with the hobby of growing them, are the Nepenthes or monkey cups we just mentioned, and also the Helianthora sun pitchers. Those two need quite high humidity and a dedicated greenhouse or a terrarium indoors with grow lights, because they like really high light levels and very, very humid conditions. So they are tropical and not as easy. They just need a bit more care.
Right. And you'd need to supplement the air moisture in there as well, presumably.
Yep, the moisture. And I was just going to say, actually, that also feeding, where they're enclosed, they're not catching anything at all. So we do give those varieties, unlike everything else, a very, very light feed with a weak orchid feed, or SB plant invigorator, which we sell on the nursery.
Yeah. With the SB plant invigorator, that's come up quite a bit, actually. People recommending that. Do you use that as a pest control as well?
It has got slight trace elements, which is perfect. You can't overfeed the cunt. This is why it's so good, is because it's a very good insecticide, but it has a very slight amount of feed in it. And when people use different mixes of orchid feed, they always tend to give them too much. And the funny thing with carnivorous plants, especially the Nepenthes, if you do overfeed them, they stop growing the traps because they don't bother trying to catch anything, because they're getting enough nitrogen from the feed you're giving, and they don't bother trying to catch flies. So plant invigorator stops that, and you'll just give them enough feed and keeping the plants healthy. Okay.
And it might sound like a bit of a curious question, but obviously they eat most things that come within the vicinity of them, but are there things that they can be plagued by as well in terms of pests?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They're not invincible. They don't catch everything. Greenfly's a pain, and none of the carnivorous plants can catch greenfly, and all of them can be affected by greenfly. So that's when you've got to watch out for. And you can use any proprietary, houseplant insecticide. Bravado's good. Yeah. SB is good. Yeah. Another problem can be mealybug and scale insect. So those are the three which can be a bit of a pain. Whitefly, I've never found it being a problem with carnivorous plants, and the sundews do catch them. So,
and why is it they don't eat the aphids?
They just can't. They're for the Sarracenia, the traps are too big, and the sundews, the aphid get right down in the crown where there aren't any sticky tentacles, So they're really good at going. I mean, you wouldn't think they'd know, but they do.
I suppose the last